Hello again everybody, I'm back and today is the second half of my 100 subscriber tag. So, as I said in the last one, the very last question I'm going to answer is the winner of the prize pack I put together. So, the rest aren't in any particular order, but the last one, that lucky person is going to win the prize pack. So, without further ado, I'll get straight down to answering the second half of the questions. Question 5, and actually question 6 then, are from Miss Penumbra. And the first question she asks is, what is one book that you absolutely refuse to read for one reason or another? So this is actually an interesting one because the book I refuse to read any more of the Orson Scott Card Ender series, because Ender's Game is one of my favourite books ever. I think it's got the best twist I've ever read, and it's just incredible. The other books in the series I've heard are very, very different in style and genre to the first book in the series, and I loved that so much, and I loved that style so much that I don't want to read anymore because I don't want to ruin that one perfect book for myself. So, not because I think I'll hate them, but just because I don't want to ruin Ender's Game, I will never read any of the rest of the series. So the other question asked by Miss Penumbra is, what is your least favourite book cover ever? So this is quite hard to do without seeing the books, so I'm going to pick my least favourite book cover on my shelf. Now, as I explained in a video a couple of weeks ago, cover is quite a big influence on what books I buy, so I'm happy with most of the books I've got that they've got beautiful covers. There is one thing about book covers that really gets on my nerves, and that is film tie-in covers. So, all in all, I think they are disgusting. I can't think of one film tie-in cover that I like. And actually, I do have only one film tie-in cover myself. And it's for Mysterious Skin by Scott Hine. Now, the only reason I have this in film cover is because this is the only edition currently in print still. So, I didn't have much choice. I watched the film and wanted to read the book. Doesn't mean I wanted the film cover. And I just don't think they're as interesting as book covers. When a book cover is designed specifically for the book, not relating to a TV series or film, the artists have to be so much more creative and really put together something interesting. Whereas with a film cover, they can literally stick a picture of one of the actors on the cover, and that counts, and I hate that. So, of all the ones I've got, this is my least favourite cover, but purely because film covers really get on my nerves. So question 6 comes from Vasilissa, and the question is, if you could pick any character from any book, who would you pick for your brother or sister, father or mother, best friend, enemy, and which character is most like you? So there's quite a lot of elements to this, and I'm going to go through them one at a time and explain who I've picked and why. So for sibling, I've picked Katniss from the Hunger Games, because I can't think of a book in recent times that has got such a strong sibling connection. Katniss volunteers to save her sister from entering the games, and throughout the whole series, her relationship with the sister is really well explored, and I just think she'd be a really good sister to have, and obviously if you got into any tight situation, she'd probably be quite good to help you get out of it. The other person I would probably pick as a sibling is from the Cherub series that I mentioned in the last video, and that'd be Kyle, who's only in the first few books, but he just, in the series, adopts quite a brotherly role towards James, the main character, and I just think he's a really good, supportive, friendly character, and I think he'd be really good to have as a brother. As my mum, I would want, without a doubt, Mrs. Weasley from Harry Potter, simply for her going absolutely mental at Bellatrix in the last book, and I also think I'd want that mum that knits jumpers with your initial on and all those kind of things. I just think she's a really cute, homely mum, and I think she'd be great to have as that. In terms of dad, I found this quite a lot harder, but actually I've gone for Harry Potter again, and I'd want Lupin, because I think he's a really interesting character. He's really dedicated as a father, and actually I think when he, spoilers, dies at the end of the last one, it's a really, really sad moment, especially because he's just had his newborn child, and I think it really symbolises kind of parently sacrifice, and I think he'd just be a great dad to have, especially paired with Mrs. Weasley. So for my best friend, I would want Gabriel from Half-Bad, so he's in the last third of this book, and he's just a really interesting character. There's some debate about whether it's going to turn out he's a boy or a girl, there's shapeshifter things involved, but I just think he's a really interesting character. He's got a really good relationship with the main character in this, and I just think he'd be really good to have as a friend. Picking an enemy was possibly the hardest for me. At first I was thinking about villains from literature, automatically as you do, and which of those would be best suited to be my enemy. But I realised it's more interesting to think about which hero would be a good enemy for me, and I decided on Nathaniel from the Bartimaeus trilogy by Jonathan Stroud. he's a bit of an anti-hero character anyway, and he is very pompous, very arrogant, and just a bit of a douche overall. So I think immediately me and him wouldn't get on, and I'd probably punch him if I met him, and so I think we'd be quite good enemies. I think he'd be quite a good enemy to have, and I think he's portrayed in a very villainous way, even as the hero of the novels. So I'd find it very interesting to have him as my enemy, and I think he'd be my choice for those reasons. The last one then is who do I think I'm most like? So this was the one I found most difficult, and eventually how I decided on an answer for this was to work out whose decisions and relationships I related to and agreed with most. And I think the character who I've got most in common with, who I'm the most relatable to, and who I would kind of see myself in most is Seth, the main character from Patrick Ness's More Than This. So anyone who's read it knows Seth is suicidal. I'm not. Just to clarify, that bit is the only exception, I think. But other than that, he's a very interesting character. His relationships with other people are very, very interesting. And I think the decisions he makes and how he approaches the situation he's put in are very similar to the ways I would. And I found his voice very relatable. And I think out of all the characters I can think of in literature, he'd be the one I'd pick to be most like me. So question 7 comes from Kelly Loop 86. What's the sexiest book you've read and the sexiest character? I have to say I'm not a fan of sexy books necessarily, as you can tell from my rant about 50 Shades in the last video. I think of all the books I've read that have got sex as a form of content, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is the one that stands out. Now this is very different. It's not sexy in the normal way, because in this sex is a very important plot point, but it's kind of sexual violence rather than sexy sex. So it's quite different in that format, but I think that's the one that sticks out for me as the literary sex that I think has been the most interesting to me and that has contributed most to the book overall. So in terms of the sexiest character, another book that I read which actually has more sex in it, in the standard sexy style, and which has very sexy characters in, is The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Murakami. So I'll admit to straight away that the sex in this are really awfully written sex scenes. But the way that the character Malta Kano and Krita Kano are both represented are as very sexual characters, and their roles in this are very sexual, and the way the main character perceives them is very much in a sexual manner. And I think the sex in this, again, has a big contributory factor to the book and the plot and the character development. And I think that the way the two Kano sisters are presented makes them probably the sexiest characters that I can think of. But as I've said, I'm not a big aficionado in sexy books. These are just the ones that I think, from what I've read, are most suitable. So question 8, penultimate questions, come from Chapter Select. And the question is, if you could beat the beep out of someone with a book, what book do you think would best do the trick? So obviously the Bible immediately came to mind, but then I had to think and thought, actually, to rub, salt in the wound, I'd use the One Direction autobiography. So 2 reasons this would be good. 1, they're very glossy pages with lots of illustrations, so it's a very heavy book and would do some serious damage. And secondly, I think being killed by bludgeoning with a One Direction biography is probably one of the most insulting ways to go for a lot of people, and so that'd be my pick for that. Chapter Select's other question is, if any villain could become the romantic interest of any hero in a novel, which would you pick, and what would their first date be like? So actually for this, I picked Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. So I can't say too much because it's quite a big spoiler, but the main character in this has essentially 3 love interests throughout the book, and one of those is also a significant villain, and I just think their relationship is brilliant. They've got a really good dynamic, and all the way through the book I just wanted them to be together despite all the odds against everything. For a while it looked like it might happen, and then there's big twists and it doesn't, and I think it's a very complicated relationship. It's not as simple as hero and villain and love interest and non-love interest, but they are the characters that probably are least likely to get together, but that I would most like to get together. So quite a complicated answer, but if you've read it, you'll completely understand what I mean. The final question then is from British Biblioholic. Now, I had some difficulty picking this as the winner, because immediately it screams out at me as the most interesting and unusual question, but I actually know British Biblioholic personally, and she's given me a lot of help in starting up my channel, so I felt a little bit favouritism when I was picking it. But having spoken to a few other people, they've agreed it's the most interesting and unique question on the list, and the question is, if you were some kind of flower, which fictional character would you want to be the one to pick you out of the ground and rip you to pieces? So it's quite outside the box, and that's why British Biblioholic Georgina is the winner of my prize pack. So I'll get in touch with you separately afterwards, but great question, you deserve to win. The answer is quite complicated. I've decided, quite a clever answer I'd like to think. I would want to be torn to shreds, which is a very strange sentence, by Darrow from Red Rising. And the reason is because throughout this and the sequel Golden Sun, Darrow has a very bad time of things. He's very unlucky in every aspect of his life, and I think he's probably got some repressed anger and some real sadness that he would want to get out, and if someone was going to rip me to pieces, I'd at least want it to do them some good, and I think it would help Darrow get rid of some of his aggressive energies, and that would be a good thing for him. So in a selfless way, of course, I'd pick Darrow from Red Rising to be the one that rips me as a flower to shreds. So there we have it, the end of my 100 subscriber tag. It was a brilliant list of questions. Thanks so much to everyone who submitted questions. They were all brilliant. And congratulations again to British Biblioholic for winning. Thanks again as well to everyone for subscribing. To have hit 100 subscribers a month ago is incredible, and I look forward to plenty more videos in the future. If you've enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below if you've got any answers to the questions that have been asked. Anything else you want to talk about, just leave it down below. Other than that, my Twitter and Goodreads and the link to the previous video is down below, and I'll be back in the next couple of days with my next video.